Now, the thing about jobs, though, is that we often take them so we can buy stuff. So you can buy a car, so you can buy a house, and then we get this idea, you know what would make me even happier? If I had a bigger house and a bigger car. And then we fill it with all sorts of stuff. So the average home today contains more than 10,000 to 50,000 items. And with that comes a lot of bills and oftentimes debt. And when you get in debt, you often get trapped in a job that you may or may not enjoy. So my next guest is a little against the grain with that trajectory. When he was 20, he wanted to be a bajillionaire. He wanted to accumulate as much stuff as possible. And then at 25, he realized, you know what? Maybe there's another way to live. His name is Robin Greenfield, and he is on a quest to find as sustainable a life as possible. He is currently undergoing an experiment where he is foraging all of his food. He also did another experiment where he literally gave away everything he owned. And although he's a little extreme, yes, he is extreme, he does have lessons about how we can reframe our relationship with stuff and maybe find a little bit of freedom and some sustainability. So let's bring on Robin. Robin, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me on, Michael.
And you're recording from Wisconsin, is that correct?
Yes, I've just returned from a 3-month speaking tour in Florida and the southern United States, and I've just returned to my home of Wisconsin.
I love it. Awesome. So for people who aren't familiar with you, fill us in sort of cliff notes about what you do.
Well, that's one of the hardest things for me is to try to succinctly describe what I do, because what I am trying to do is question everything about our societal norms and structures, everything that is considered the status quo, but in truth is, the reality is that we live in a very extreme society. We have 5% of the world's population in the United States, but we consume 25% of the world's resources. So this, by definition, is extreme. And basically, what I do is I go to the other end of this extreme to point this out, to bring attention to it, but also just because in order to live a life of harmony, it actually requires to go to a deep extreme. So I've basically dedicated my life to living simply, sustainably, trying to do no unnecessary harm to people, to the planet, to the plants and animals, and to use my life as a message to help others on this journey as well. I'm not here to convince anyone, or there's no have-tos or shoulds, goods or bads. There's no guilt or anything like that. It's just, hey, here's another way from what you see in the mainstream. And if you're into this other way, then I'm here to support you on that journey.
Since you mentioned extremes, I'm going to make an admission here, which you may, I'm going to guess you disapprove of it, but we'll find out. I recently went on a cruise. Now, a cruise is a floating buffet / shopping mall where everything is excessive. Now, the reason for this is I had some family friends that retired, and so it was like rally all the troops. We're going to have a ton of fun. But it did get me thinking, just noticing, like, all the food that probably gets thrown away, the fact that there's just so much stuff to buy, and then they dump you off of these ports that are basically like outlet malls. And so it made me think of you. What is your reaction to that?
Well, okay, first thing is I can't say that I necessarily disapprove of anything, because who am I to get to approve or disapprove of things? Right?
Thank you. Okay.
Yes. But it's not in alignment with my values and the way that I want to live my life. So I used to live a very sort of consumeristic life, and I was very focused on material possessions and financial wealth. And I made a goal of being a millionaire by the time I was 30. And I was very much on this pursuit. I had a new car that I spent every Sunday shining. The 3-bedroom apartment, 3 blocks from the beach was a big deal to me. As a Wisconsin boy, I was living sort of the dream, surfing at the beach. And what happened is I simply started to watch documentaries and read books, The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, and Food, Inc., and The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard, and documentaries like The Zeitgeist. And I just started to realize that my whole life was to a large degree a lie. I was living this grand hypocrisy what we call the American dream is actually the world's nightmare for billions of people and millions of species of plants and animals. So now it was time to unlearn so much, to relearn and take control of my life so that I could be living in a much more harmonious way with all the life we share this home with.
So what were the first things you did? And then the underlying question being, why did you feel like you had to tip into like, we're going to go at this hard? It wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to do a little less. You're like, I'm going to do a lot less.
It was starting with small things. I looked in my garbage can and I saw all the ways that I was creating trash. The disposable paper towels, for example, no need to buy those, just reusable washcloths, cotton rags. Looked at all of the food that was wrapped in plastic packaging and stopped going to Walmart and started to go to the local farmers market. There was a food co-op called People's Food Co-op, and I started to bring my own reusable containers to the bulk section and fill up my grains, nuts, seeds, oils, spices, all of that. Started to ride my bike more, drive the car less, started to compost all the food scraps and everything that I could, started to grow a little bit of food, forage a little bit of food, got rid of all the toxic chemicals I was putting on my body and the Febreze I was spraying on everything. And so, just step by step, what I had done is I made a list of over 100 changes that I wanted to make, and I hung that up in my kitchen, which was right by the front door. So I'd see it all the time. My friends would see it. And I just set out on this journey of one step at a time, unraveling the web of consumerism and monetization that I was so deeply wrapped into. And as I broke each strand of that web, making new strands to build a new web, a web of living in harmony, simply, sustainably, in community, in connection, and in a demonetized way.
That's the idea of the checklist is really interesting. And there's some good psychology behind that. The fact that it's right there for you to view in your kitchen, you're having this constant reminder of what you need to do. It reminds me of this study in surgical wards in hospitals. And errors in that setting can be really, really bad. Now, the issue is that every surgeon thinks that they have it locked down. Like, they're a surgeon. I'm the smartest person in the room. You don't need to tell me what to do. When they started doing checklists about what exactly we need to do before, during, and after surgery, the rate of errors went down significantly because there's this list giving them the constant reminder, this is what we need to do.